shore. Lift up your head to the rising sun, Bahama till the road you trod leads unto your God. March on, Bahama land. Could you remain standing just briefly as I invite Bishop Hall to come with an invocation?
Let us pray. For the peace and safety of our land, we beseech your mercies, O God. For those responsible for the enforcement of our laws, we ask for your guidance and protection. Thank you, Lord, for the wisdom to put to good use all the advancement of technology in our day. Be pleased to be in our midst, and we will be careful to give you all the praise. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Once more, pleasant good morning to each and every one of you. I'd like to recognize the Minister of National Security, OAT, the Honorable Tommy Tranquest, and our Commissioner of Police, and all the senior officers, government officials. If I do miss, I do apologize. We'd be grateful to have all of you here today. There are also persons who are part of the community policing and teammates of mine in the Northeastern Consultative Committee. Once more, I want to thank you for taking the time out to come here today. Just as a slight overview, we will try our best to speed up the presentation because of the time scheduling, out of respect for everybody involved. The presentation that will be done here will be done by Mr. Greg Rowland and Mr. David Jones. First is the taller, and the second, the latter. The presentation will be in two parts. The presentation that you will receive here will actually show you the full extent of the system, its capabilities, a little bit of the case studies, and information of where it has been deployed. And following that, we would move you to the forces range where we will do a live fire demonstration. We'll be using a demo version of the system, because you can't bring the whole thing. So you can see how the system actually performs in a real-life setting. As way of introduction, I think, and in consideration of how the state of our country and the world, even economically now, some people would say that the things we're going through is like Camelot lost. And so when I look at the situation that we've been faced with, not only now, we just had a shooting on Sunday past, someone got shot in the head just yesterday. I see this menace as a dragon made out of steel, lead, and gunpowder. I see the work of our Honorable Commissioner of Police, who has motivated many of us to do our part in crime fighting, whether through information gathering or partnering to relieve the police of unnecessary burdens that civilians could help, or taking responsibility for our own security. I see him and his team as that knight in shining armor whose job it is to defend us against such ills. But that dragon seems to be omnipresent, and our knights are limited in their resources. And despite all realities, what some people may presume to be, they have been doing an exceptional job with what they have. But this is our country, and we all have the burden of doing everything we can, providing every tool we can to assist. It is my hope that after a review, that a determination may be made if it's seen fit, that this could be a tool in the arsenal against that dragon. one that could extend the sword of the commissioner a little bit further, and the shield that the police also offer to protect the community just a little bit better, to be able to rid our nation of those deadly weapons that are being wielded illegally in the hands of intoxicated men, young men, who are intoxicated with the power of having a weapon in their hand and committing these crimes. So I want to thank you all for coming here today, and I want you to listen as attentive you can. Feel free to be as interactive as necessary, because the most important thing here today is that you get a best possible first-hand information as to the capability of what is being offered here today. That you can make the determination as best you can as to its effectiveness as a potential tool in the hands of our crime fighting units. Once more, I want to extend a heartfelt thanks to each and every one of you for being here today. And immediately we will turn the presentation over to Mr. Gregg, who will begin the presentation of the Shotspotter gunshot detection system. David.
Well, first, once again, thank you for your time. Thank you for inviting us to your beautiful country. We arrived on Saturday, and we've had a great time since we've been here. It's a beautiful country. And once again, we hope the presentation is informative. We hope that you're able to learn a lot about our company, about our solution, and how we can help the country reduce the gun violence and get the guns off the street. Once again, my name is David Jones. I'm the sales director for the Caribbean and the southeastern part of the United States. I live in Wilmington, North Carolina, and I've been in law enforcement technology for about 14 years now. And with me is Greg Rowland. He's our senior vice president back at our corporate office in Mountain View, California. And what we'd like to first do is play a quick video that will give a very good overview of our company and our technology, and then we'll actually jump right into the presentation. So with that, I'll start.
The Shotspotter technology gives us very precise information so that officers do not waste time riding through the various blocks where the calls come from. So $1.8 million to get to an area very, very quickly and prevent additional gunfire and additional loss of life, to me, is a very small investment.
Big difference to respond to a corner or a geographical area than it is to know that the shot came from the side of a building or behind a building or in front of a building within a 20 or 30-foot range. Tactically, that is significant.
I've been there when the grass has been warm and the air was still full of gun smoke.
The Shotspotter system allowed police to respond within seconds to a shots-fired call on the corner of Dwight Street Extension.
What these guys were going to do with full body armor on, fully loaded 9mm, Shotspotter probably stop a crime from being committed.
Officers say the Shotspotter not only helps them locate where shots are being fired, but it also assists them in mapping out where most of the incidents are happening, so they can put more manpower in that area.
What this lets us to do is put more resources, directed patrol in those communities on the times that these gunfire is occurring, so that we can try to reduce the incidence of violence in the community.
Now, not only does this Shotspotter help locate gunfire around the city, it also helps detectives know the exact time and place shots were fired if they have to use the information on a homicide or aggravated assault case.
Had we not been able to locate this person because no one called 911, no one called emergency, this individual could have possibly died. So this technology has saved, at least last night, one life.
When a gun is fired, it creates an acoustic shockwave, a sonic impulse radiating outward at 1,100 feet per second. The impulse strikes the highly sensitive sensors. To pinpoint the shot's location, the system then uses triangulation, a process measuring how much time it takes for the sound shockwave to reach each sensor. This information is then relayed to the sheriff's dispatch center, showing up as a red dot on the Shotspotter screen.
Those sensors are so accurate, they can tell where a gunshot was fired within 10 feet. And yes, they can tell the difference between a gunshot and a firecracker.
But when a weapon is fired, the sensors can detect the shot and plot the location on a satellite map to within 25 meters of the exact spot, and notify the sheriff's dispatch center all in mere seconds.
You'll listen to what we designated as multiple gunshots. Our Shotspotter system will give us up into the matter of feet how far away the gunshot is coming from this location. In this particular case, it tells us that the shot came from the rear of this house, 715 feet.
It's been a year since police put gunfire detectors in North and South Minneapolis. The exact locations of the Shotspotter technology are secret, but officers say those neighborhoods are seeing a 23% drop in killings, a 20% drop in robberies, and a 10% drop in attacks with weapons. Violent crime is dropping throughout Minneapolis, but as Jason DeRusha reports, it's dropping faster around the Shotspotters.
Shotspotter was first rolled out by the Century Station in Linwood, which patrols 13 square miles of southern LA County. Murders there are down 40% in the past 4 years. Deputies attribute much of that decrease to Shotspotter.
I know it's not the golden key, but it's definitely an added bonus, a good tool to have in our toolbox while we fight crime here in Oakland.
Officer Roland Holmgren says the Shotspotter detectives can determine the caliber of gun, if more than one weapon was used, and the direction of shots. He says it saved lives, and that's worth the money.
While we get this set up, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the company and where we started and what we're all about. The company basically started around a gentleman who worked for Stanford University's research arm. And he was developing some technology around locating the epicenter of earthquakes quickly. And this was experimental acoustic design technology using what's known as triangulation. I'm not going to get too technical. Well, the problem he had was he actually lived in a city called Redwood City, California, where there was a tremendous amount of ethnic diversity. He had people from many different countries living there, and the cultures that converged there said it's okay to take a gun and shoot it when you're happy, when you're sad, when you're mad, when you're getting married, when you're whatever you're doing. And so he said on certain days, especially Cinco de Mayo and New Year's Eve and 4th of July, on certain days of celebration, he said people could not even go outside their house because of the rain of bullets coming down, and he felt the quality of life in his neighborhood was unbearable. And he went to the police department, he went to the county sheriff's department, he said, you got to do something about this. And the citizens group says, you got to do something about this. And the police chief threw up his hand and said, we know we have a problem, but we don't know how to find these people. They shoot, they go back inside the house. We don't have enough officers to go investigate every call we get. And quite frankly, we only get a call about 1 in every 5 or 10 gunshot that goes off. So most of them we miss anyhow because people are immune to it, or they don't want to call in, or they're scared, or they're afraid, or whatever the issue is, or they don't think it's a gunfire, or whatever it is. We don't really know enough to be able to go after it. And if we did, we don't have enough officers to deal with it anyhow. So this gentleman, this scientist, took his science and adapted it to using sensors instead of sensors in the ground to pick up earthquakes, sensors to triangulate on gunfire. And he went to the police chief and said, tell you what, I've got this new technology. If you put it in and you use it for 6 months and it's effective for you, I want you to pay for it. And I want you to be on a maintenance contract with us so that we can help you over time to reduce gunfire. I'm happy to say that Redwood City now has gone from hundreds of shots in only 2 square mile area, but it's still a 2 square mile area, down to about 1 shot a month. So we figure between 80 and 90% reduction over time in gunfire, and they're still on maintenance with us 13 and a half years later. And they don't want to shut it off, even though they don't have a problem anymore, because they want to stay on top of it. They don't want it to come back. They don't want to have that issue resurface. Now, did they arrest everybody who was shooting guns? No. Did they stop all violent crime in their area? No. Did they displace some people that didn't want to go to jail when they shot their guns? Sure, they went somebody else to shoot their guns. But they got them out of there. Quality of life issue, number 1. Number 2 is celebratory gunfire is an elective event versus a homicide or another crime where somebody determines they want to shoot somebody. If you know you're going to get caught when you stick a gun in the air, there's a high probability that you're not going to do that, or you're going to think twice about doing that. So our system over the years in the cities that's been around has what we call street credibility, or street cred. When you announce Shotspotter is in your town, People go to the internet, they find out, they look at the over 10,000 news stories that have been done on us in the last 10 years, and they go, you know what? Shooting a gun here is probably not the right thing to do. There's a lot of benefits too, and I'll talk about that later, but once we start rolling in here, in the interest of time, we want to get you going. So we call anything that you're interested about a critical event. This could be an explosion, it can be a transformer, it can be a building on fire, it could be anything that creates what we call an impulsive sound. That means a pop, bang, boom, or something like that. We're now a homeland security technology for the U.S. government, and in terms of locating potential threats for the security of homeland. We detect mortar fire and sniper fire for the U.S. military to try to keep our bases safe and what we call our critical infrastructure safe. Places where people don't want shooting, and if they get it, they can react very fast to be able to quell that shooting. It is a very innovative technology. Like I talked about before, we've had over 10,000 news stories. Part of the videos you saw there were from National Geographic, the Science magazines. We've got all kinds of awards on the technology. But the bottom line is this technology helps police departments with a new tool. It's a tool. The police department has to wrap themselves around it. The chief in Birmingham said it well. Our technology changes the DNA of law enforcement because it changes the way you do business, and we'll talk about that later. Big investment in the technology, and what I want to leave you with today is that when you turn Shotspotter on, a year from now, you're going to know that you made a significant difference in the neighborhoods that it's turned on. Go ahead. So we talked about this. Our single biggest customer in the United States is the Federal Bureau of Investigation for two reasons. One, you've probably heard about some famous sniper cases in our country. We help them solve several of those. But the other reason is we have projects in the United States, and I'm sure you do similar things here, called Weed and Seed and Project Safe Neighborhoods and Project Safe Fire. The FBI works on a joint task force operation with local law enforcement and the DEA and Customs and other agencies, and they use our tool to gather the intelligence they need to do their work. Again, we're only one tool, but we help them, and so the Bureau has funded a lot of the technology around the United States. We're currently now in 40 cities in the U.S., large and small, and used by all of these agencies and others. By the end of this year, we'll probably double in size again. Go ahead. So go ahead and flip this. So one of the things about our technology is every city that has bought our technology is either in the process of expanding or has expanded multiple times. Cities like Washington, D.C., our nation's capital started with 2 square miles, and we now cover 2/3 of our capital, and by the end of this year, we'll probably cover the entire capital region. And the reason for that is they're getting results, and they're able to show the citizens that they can make a meaningful change in the quality of life in a city by providing police presence and intelligence in the process of providing law enforcement. So we don't just detect gunfire, we detect anything that goes bang, and there's a reason for that. First of all, there's a lot of things in the world, you know, there's a lot of noises out there where you live, and what we have to do is kind of listen to everything and only tell you about the things you care about. But believe it or not, police in the U.S. find that if there's a lot of fireworks activity in a particular place, that can actually be a leading indicator to other activity that you may not know about before. And the fireworks may be low enough that it doesn't cause anybody to have concern or nobody calls it in. There was a major bust in St. Louis about a month after they put our system up there, and I'll show you later. Our software will show you on maps concentrations of different things that are happening over time. And then you can look at that and say, you know what? That backyard just had, over the last 3 months, had 100 fireworks shot off. Something's going on. So they literally sent somebody out to watch the house. It looked like the lobby of your Hilton, people running in and out, running in and out. They did a raid on the home, got a drug lab, a meth lab, got a bunch of guns, and got some explosive materials where they were trying to build pipe bombs and things like that. And what they were doing is testing their loads in the backyard. So that's the kind of intelligence that the system can give you to look at forward-thinking operations when you're looking at things. So, you know, I hope the heck you guys never have IEDs in this country, but we do. We are designed to detect and classify. And when I say classify, our system will actually try to tell you what it is so you can react to it. But you also get to listen to it, and I'll show you here in a second. Now this one, why don't you play the heavy fireworks? This happens to be in the back of a school on a Saturday afternoon. Listen what happened. bought a fully automatic AK-47 on the street. He took two magazines, loaded them up, went over to the school on a Saturday afternoon to test fire the gun. Nobody was around. That never got called in. Luckily, they had Shotspotter in the area. They rolled a couple officers. We don't know what the kid was going to do. But any kid that's on a school ground with an AK-47 full auto with two magazines, you really want to know about that. They didn't even know it happened unless Shotspotter picked it up. They got this kid off the street. Maybe he wasn't planning anything. Maybe he was just playing around. But maybe he had something else in mind. You don't know. But the idea is to be proactive when you pick up stuff like that. In this particular case, this explosion, so that's actually a old junkyard. It was fully engulfed in fire. Nobody called it in, and those were the tires and the vehicles exploding. And so they were able to call this over to the fire department and get aid there quicker. Eventually they'd have figured it out. But getting first responders to a scene quicker means that you've got more control on what's going on. You have the intelligence, you can direct traffic better, you can deal with the facilities that you need, you can direct EMTs and other things that you need to deal with that. Why don't you go ahead and roll on here. So what really put us on the map was about 5 years ago. The FBI called us up and they said, we've got this guy running around a town called Columbus, Ohio in the United States. And he was taking pot shots and he literally killed a poor woman, innocent woman driving down the road, and he was shooting others and wounding others. And this happened over several months. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but his MO was to shoot and move, and so he didn't leave any physical evidence. He didn't leave anything for them to go on, and they could not create a pattern. They had over 100 officers and agents assigned to this and couldn't figure it out. We ended up bringing the system out and deploying it all the way around the beltway there, and within a couple of weeks, they were able to develop a method of operation. In other words, how is this guy doing it, and from where is he shooting? And then, obviously, through good police work, they figured out, okay, if he's shooting from overpasses during this period of time, with this type of, the overpasses never had an egress and ingress on it, they started developing a pattern. And they ultimately started knowing where to go look for the evidence. And they found the shell casings eventually from where he was shooting. And after about 2 weeks, actually put a case together with our information and other information. And they were able to do two things. First of all, there were 4 copycats that had taken credit for doing it. They were able to prove that the copycats were not copycats. And they put all 4 of those guys in jail. And then they took the physical evidence from the case itself and used that to find the person. Also presented to him an arraignment, and the person took a plea. So they didn't have to spend all the money putting this guy in jail. He's gone forever. They didn't even have to prosecute him. They played the incidents. They laid out the evidence to the defense attorney. The attorney had a little chat with his client, and this guy went away for the rest of his life. So, like I talked about before, it is noisy out there. You have planes and motorcycles. I've been here long enough to know you have both. You also have sun that I should wear sunscreen for. I'll learn better. You have all those noises out there, and our job is to figure out what is it that you care about and throw out all the other stuff that we call junk. Now, from an intelligence standpoint, we can tell police a lot of information on things that are creating noise, but we really typically report anything that goes bang. And we do that very well, and we'll talk about how we do that in a second. So we do a lot of what we call pre-classification work. So our software, like a fingerprint, knows what something sounds like. And it's automatically going to do its best to identify that sound. But we also provide the audio. In other words, we give the sound of the incident to people who care about it so they can listen to what's going on. And why that's important is there's a lot of things that sound like one thing, it might be another, but we always want that intelligence to be available to whoever's monitoring. Guns sound like guns, and once there's more than one gunshot going off, we're 99% good on classifying a gun. The problem is there are things called M80s and M90s, and they characteristically sound just like a 45. A 45 revolver sounds the same. So we may get that right, we may get that wrong, but we also encourage you that if something that big is blowing off and there's multiple rounds of that, you might want to go out and check it out anyhow. We also pick up other things around the incident. So if there's a drag race going on or something, some other things, you're going to get that in the audio, and you're going to be able to start putting together 1 + 1 + 1 and kind of figure out what happened around that scenario. So we call ourselves the 24/7 witness. We hear everything, we report on the things that the police department care about, and we give you all the information surrounding the event itself. Go ahead. So the 3 things that really Shotspotter technology provides to the community law enforcement is the first. We give you immediate situational awareness on anything that happens in the area where we cover. And what that means is you can have officers arriving on scene within as fast as they can get there versus waiting for a phone call to come in and the other things that drive them. That has driven our cities to be able to increase arrests. We also tie into video surveillance systems, and instead of having to have somebody watch the camera, our technology will actually turn the video in the direction of the event automatically. So that reduces manpower and overhead and actually provides a lot more accuracy on the video side. So we call our technology wide area acoustics surveillance, and then you can add targeted video surveillance with the technology if you need it. The second part is the analysis phase. If you don't have any witnesses to what happened, you have nothing to go on, and unless there's a lot of evidence on the ground or possibly a victim, you really don't have much to go on. Our system tells you how many shooters, how many rounds were fired. If they're shooting at each other, we can tell you the angle of fire so the investigators can go find the physical evidence. We put you right on scene so that you know exactly where it happened. And in our law enforcement in the United States, it is now used for what's classically known, and I'm sure you have the same issue here, probable cause. So you have to be able to say, there's a reason for me to jump over this fence and go in the backyard. I see a bunch of gunshots coming up on this screen, and I need to bring a lot of officers in because somebody's in trouble. Somebody's in trouble. I need that information. And an investigative standpoint, investigators now carry our software in a laptop out in a vehicle or to the scene and actually replay it so they can live through the scene to understand what happened in terms of the evidence itself. And probably the most important thing now for us and for our customers is the intelligence. We store and track all this information, and you can look at it and look at a particular neighborhood and see exactly where your hotspots are, know what time of day your problems are, know what kind of problems you have in that area, and then focus your resources where they're best needed. And you have that intelligence from our system that's beyond hearsay and beyond I think. It's I know, and I know what's happening here, and I know we got to do something about it, and I know we need to be proactive in this particular area.
Hey Greg, I think the second one, that's a drive-by scenario.
Yes. Important. If the shooter is moving, that's the other intelligence. We can actually tell you in what direction and at what speed the shooter is moving. So there's a lot of information. I'm going to run through the toolkit with you when we put that up. The other thing is, if you're, I think you guys probably use a ComStat process here. Our reports go straight into ComStat every week and give you the kind of intelligence you need to know what's going on and how to get after it in a much more proactive fashion. Go ahead. So Homeland Security, I think you probably understand the need for understanding where things are going on, and I think we'll jump over this in the sake of time. The how it works part, I think this is important. We put sensors around an area where you're having a gunfire problem. We put them up on top of buildings, we put them in places where they're not seen and they're not known to be, and we use a radio network to bring that information back from the sensors into a server, and then we take that information and we send that out wherever it needs to be. And wherever it needs to be can be in a vehicle, it can be to your pager, it can be in your dispatch, it can be in a lot of places. We even have some cities that have websites so that the citizens can actually see what's going on in the Shotspotter system in terms of gunfire. Not sure whether that's what you want to do here, but that information can be sent anywhere you need it to go. It uses a technology called triangulation, and that means that each one of these sensors has GPS in it. It knows when the sound gets there, and it triangulates based on the arrival of the sound itself. And it's very accurate. It's become more accurate in the last 10 years. Go ahead. So it's providing powerful intelligence. And when you have powerful intelligence, you already have a bunch of very good trained police officers and law enforcement activities out there. Then when you have that powerful intelligence, you combine it with those efforts, then when you have location awareness, incident severity, and accelerated incident detection, you can do a lot of stuff. And when I say a lot of stuff, if you can imagine an officer knowing within 10 seconds where a gunshot is being fired, and being able to either individually get there or have somebody else get there shortly thereafter. What does that mean to everybody? It means that you can render aid to somebody that might have been wounded. You can find witnesses that are still standing around. You can locate physical evidence. But you can also provide comfort, and that comfort is an officer came, somebody's there, somebody cares, and I'm right there on top of what's going on. Go ahead. So I don't think I need to expand too much on this, but the bottom line is before Shotspotter, when somebody called in an incident from a home, gunfire and noises travel a long way, and they bounce over buildings and they skip, and if you've heard gunfire yourself, you know it's very hard to tell where it's coming from. So you might call and say, I heard gunfire, but the officers have to go over here because that's where you heard it. And then somebody else may call on the phone and identify that, and they heard it over here and another house heard it over there. The time it takes for the officers to figure out where it came from and drive the circles and get out there is wasted time in terms of the ability to be able to address that problem. And so we put you right on the dot very quickly, within 10 seconds or so, and it moves off. Why don't you just keep this is an important screen. Yeah, right here. And we'll show you this in a second. This is what you see from the system. All of the other stuff, the mechanics, the engineering, the site surveys, all the other things we do that in terms of making sure the system works properly. But this is all the police department really cares about is where is it, what happened, what's the first local address we can, and then give us the data. How many shots were fired, what happened. Then the detectives and the investigators can come back to the same information, pull that information out, and understand what happened in the incident itself. This picture is painted in 10 seconds. So you can have this anywhere you have a computer in 10 seconds. And with this picture, it's a lot of information in terms of what's happening and how do I deal with it, including the ability to actually click on a sensor and hear what's going on. And we picked up numerous things involved with crimes that help the investigators pull the data together to not only investigate but prosecute, put these people away. We've been involved in many officer-involved shootings where one person says this, another person says this, the system doesn't lie. It tells you exactly what happened, who used force, what they did, how many shots they fired, exactly what happened. So, rapid incident response. So let's just keep going through these because we've got a little bit of time here. We need to keep going. So while David's kind of flowing through these, how about questions at this point?
What's the radius? The radius?
So we deploy it in what we call coverage areas. And so the coverage area can be as small as a square mile or as big as an entire city or an entire island, whatever the authorities believe is the area that they need to have covered. And it doesn't have to be contiguous. A lot of cities, the authorities have identified hotspots here and hotspots there and hotspots there, and we can just put coverage out where it's needed. Sometimes you find out it's needed somewhere else and it can be filled in later.
What about invasion of privacy issues?
So we've been tested thoroughly by the United States Justice Department. As you know, in our Constitution, I'm sure you have similar ones in yours, there's wiretapping laws, and there's unreasonable search and seizure, and there's also what we call expected right to privacy. Our system's only designed to queue on things that go boom. So as long as there's nothing that's going boom, in other words, fireworks or gunfire or things like that, the system's only listening for that stuff. It's not listening for people's voices. The other thing is we always install it at such a height above ground so that it can hear in an omnidirectional fashion that it would not pick up a normal conversation in a home or on a street or something like that, even if it was activated. However, we do pick up vehicles speeding away from the scene. We pick up people screaming, sometimes screaming somebody else's name. We've solved many cases by picking up somebody screaming somebody's name during an event. And that is all admissible in court. There's no privacy issues. Obviously, if you're getting shot and you're screaming, the right to privacy, I hope would be the same here. You would think that that'd be okay for you to know about. So we really don't violate them, and we've gone to great lengths not to violate anybody's privacy. What else? Yes, sir.
The system really rely on the GPS system, mostly.
Yeah, the sensors itself have GPS in them because we need to know exactly where they are and what time it is at each sensor. And so the algorithms actually say, I know where this sensor is and where this sensor is and where this sensor is because we have GPS in it. And we use that to calculate the time it took the sound to reach each one of those sensors. And that's how we actually plot the map. Then we take satellite data. Typically, you have your own that we can use, or we can go get satellite data, which is then used for the mapping standpoint. And it's called parcel data. We actually have all your street addresses and all the other things in there. So when that dot comes up, it's going to give you the closest responding address, which is important for law enforcement to know, to get there quickly, to be able to react and interact with the scene itself, is to have that kind of data very quickly and not guess in terms of what's going on. So that's how it uses GPS. What else? Great questions. Ma'am? I can see the question brewing back there. I just see it now. Okay, well, I'll keep going, and hopefully we'll come up with more. So one of the other things, I'm not sure whether you actually have laptops in vehicles, but if you do, or you're thinking about it, or there are some out there, our software can go anywhere. And what we encourage, and a lot of the law enforcement agencies that use our software, is having the information out in the field is another level of being able to provide the kind of response and the services. So the software is designed to be able to be in environments where all you have is maybe a cellular data radio or very thin connection, and we can even push the information in terms of, you know, street address and information like that to a BlackBerry. So having it out there, we do have a lot of cities that we're in where gunfire on Friday and Saturday night is just overwhelming. And so by able to push this out to the field and having people in the field know what's going on, they're able to actually be there quicker and provide presence in the area where the problem is. I'm sure it's the same way on the islands. If you have a police officer in the area, there's less likelihood that there's going to be crime there. So if you know where it's going on, you have presence there, hopefully then people will stop thinking about what they're getting ready to do. So this is the mobile view, and again, it's designed for people to just see what's going on and understand and be able to be there very quickly. Go ahead. So what we found is about 1 in 10 times a ShotSpotter activation goes off in a city we have, there's a chance for an apprehension. And the chance is, if an officer is driving down the road and he just saw the gunfire happen 20 seconds before that, and somebody happens to be walking down the street, you stop that person and say, let's talk for a second. Did you see that gunshot up the street? Oh no, I didn't have anything to do with it. Well, what's that doing in your pocket? Oh, that's not mine. That's fascinating. You get what I mean? You have information where you can go and start looking at people and start to peel back the onion in terms of what's happening. So by giving me that exact address and that information, we want to increase the suspect apprehension very quickly. Because once they disappear, it's very hard to get them back. Go ahead. So evidence for your detectives, for your investigators, knowing where to go find simple things like shell casings and other things that will tell you what's going on, and preserving that is very important to getting these investigations done. In court, same thing. And what we do, we have long-term relationships with our customers. We always end up in court with our customers because we help develop the evidence to put people away. And you don't want to lose in court after you've done all that good work. So we provide expert witness testimony on how the science works, and we'll help the customer be able to develop a case to make this information usable and stick in the criminal justice process. I can't tell you how many times we hear from the cities that use our technology about getting there fast enough to save a life. And to me, and being involved in a technology that helps you provide the speed in which you need to get there and provide ambulatory care is very important in terms of being able to recognize the value of this technology. So, in terms of crime analysis, again, we talked about this before, being able to tell the law enforcement where things are going on. As you can see, track the number of gunshots in a particular area, mark those areas. We're gonna pull up the software in a second and kind of show you a little bit about what's going on there. But being able to have that so you're proactive is very important to the mission. So why don't we go ahead and pull up the PSC demo real quick and show them what it looks like. Okay, yep, that's fine. Go to the report section. Yeah, sure. So here's a particular scenario where there was a known location of a crime problem here, and someplace that they watched. And this actually popped up about 3 in the morning on a dispatcher screen. Go ahead. So talk about hearing things and knowing what's going on. This happened to be a car show. A bunch of people stacked up with each other. They were selling drugs. They were comparing their cars, and things went bad, and they started shooting each other, and they started speeding off. And so nobody called this in, but dispatch got that intelligence and started rolling an officer to it. Then 23 seconds later, this came in. So what happens a lot around crime is one gunshot begets another one. And what happened here was other people started shooting it, whether they shoot because they want to mask it or whether they're mad at the other people. But within 23 seconds, all of a sudden we know something else big is going down. So they raised the severity level. They sent more officers to the scene. Still nobody had called this in. And this happened on the corner. Now, all this was tied together. And if you go to the last one. So as you can see, in a minute and 52 seconds, there were 4 shooting incidents all around the gas station where there was a known crime area. And the police saw this, were able to deal with it. They shut down the roads. So they basically built a perimeter very quickly around the area. They knew they had vehicles involved, so they cut off a lot of the vehicles before they could get in the area. They responded to the wounded medically down here in the corner, made several arrests in the situation, and were basically able to arrive safely and contain the area. Very important, from an officer standpoint, they need to know what's going on. They don't want to drive in the middle of something. They're going to get hurt. So this intelligence led them to save lives, put people in jail, and deal with the elements safely as they prosecuted their job. So another thing that our technology is used is to actually profile a shooting. When I say profile a shooter, believe it or not, women shoot differently than men. Seasoned shooters shoot differently than non-seasoned shooters. We've actually cleared several police officers in a shooting that were involved a perpetrator, because a police officer is trained to shoot one way, and a gangbanger or a street thug shoots a different way. You can use that intelligence to actually give the detective or the responders a good idea of who they're dealing with. In this particular case, this turned out to be a young gang member, and the detectives told us this, that's what they call runaway gun. And that happens when somebody's handed a gun for the first time and said, here, go play with it, or go shoot somebody, or go have fun, or do something with it. That's typically the shooting pattern of a runaway gun. It's usually a younger person, and so they use that intelligence to go do the search in the area, and sure enough, they found this young child who had handed his first gun, decided to use it against somebody else, killed the other child that he shot. They found him right in the area where we told him it was, and they knocked on his door, and he was living with his parents. Unfortunately, he admitted to doing it, but he was an early entrant to a gang violence situation. We also work a lot with agencies that do what's known as targeted enforcement. In other words, watch, understand what's happening on, and then put together strategies so that you can go after a particular area. Our system in about a month will tell you where you got a really bad area. You probably already know, but we're going to tell you a lot more about it, and then you're going to be able to develop strategies to go after that through what we call targeted enforcement. But more importantly is to track the results. You go in, you clean up a neighborhood, you work hard to be proactive, you go back to the system and say, okay, tell me everything that happened a month after that. And you start looking at that area, and as you can see, nothing. We actually tagged these 3 buildings here, or they tagged the 3 buildings as areas where they had problems. And so now, every month, through their process, their intelligence process, they go back and look at this area to see if something's coming back. And if it is, show more presence there, spend a little more time in the community, kick it back up in that area to keep the problem down. So results are what it's all about. Go ahead. So in this particular case, this happens a lot in the jurisdictions we work with. Firecrackers are actually used to trick the police and to trick people into not calling in shootings. In this particular case, 3 firecrackers were shot off. A neighbor, a good thinking neighbor, called in and said, I heard gunshots. The system showed him as firecrackers. The dispatcher said, no, my dear, those were firecrackers. And within a few seconds later, the intended issue, it was a home invasion. The gunshot went off. We picked that up. They got officers out there very quickly. The citizens didn't call back in because they thought it was a firecracker. So they wouldn't even have known about it. They actually saved that person's life. A wounded suspect, and we're able to make multiple arrests in that circumstance. So that intelligence is very important. Criminal prosecutions, we talked about this before. The system prints out all kinds of interesting reports, and we can get into the details later on what that kind of data will give you. But this is a backup service that we provide to our customers. We go through what's known as a chain of custody process. So we pull things out that can't be tampered with. They're going to go in the court, we'll work with your district attorney or prosecutors or criminal justice system, and provide what we call peeling the onion back so that they have everything they need. I can't tell you how many of these get presented in an arraignment or a court process. And the perpetrator that did it, that got amnesia, all of a sudden finds out his amnesia is not too good. And the system talked all about what they did. And all of a sudden things start coming back to them. And I can't tell you how many times we've had people roll over, confess, and deal with the situation when they actually hear what they did. And when the jury hears what they did, it's very powerful. You see it, you understand what that violent crime does, and what impact it has on the neighborhoods. Go ahead. And probably the last thing, and then we're going to go into software real quick, is we actually work with every city. We're connected through our servers to your servers. We make sure the system's up, running all the time. We make sure it's well calibrated. That's how we provide professional services. We're always updating because we have so many cities and very soon many countries. We were not able to export our technology until early this year because it was a military technology and it was restricted by the Department of Defense. We're now exporting it to many countries around the world, and we're providing these services so that those systems are up because they become a critical piece of what you do, a critical piece of what law enforcement does out there and knowing what's going on. And so we're taking all that information and rolling that into all the new systems that go out in the street. Yep, so this is a good slide too. And we talked about this a little bit in terms of having intelligence like your what we call hot address lists, time of day, firecrackers lists. Go ahead. So knowing where all this stuff is happening, keep going. Gunfire activity by day, very important information. Incident time of day, so you can actually know how to set up your patrols and your manpower required on your patrols. And then we actually, we provide reports to our customers as well, and we show them trends. And hopefully all those trends are down. This was Oakland, California. First year we put in the system. Believe it or not, this is 4th of July. That's what happens, and I don't know about your island, but a lot of places that really kicks up. But the overall trend in Oakland was, first year was 50%. We're looking at another 50% this year. And the body count, the people being murdered is following that. And those are the kind of results that we want our cities to see. You know, the numbers trending down and the police department being able to spend more time dealing with it. And then these are reports that you can spit out on hotspot analysis, gunfire activity, all those types of things that the law enforcement activities can use themselves. Yes. So why don't we go to the software? While we're loading this other software, questions? Yes.
Yes, earlier in the presentation, a lady mentioned a $1.8 million investment.
Right.
Is that the average cost?
That was the chief in Washington, D.C., and that was the third addition to their system. They started with a small system that the FBI brought to the Anacostia area, and they've been adding on ever since. So that bought them another area of coverage, and by the time they're done, they'll probably have a little over $5 million invested in the system. So the system costs dollars per square mile, and it depends on how much you put out there. But an average, a big city might have $2 to $5 million invested, whereas small areas might be in the less than $1 million range. It really depends on the coverage area that you need to have.
So 145 square miles would be, you say?
145, well, I mean, the first question is, do you need fish spotter or, I mean, seriously, you really want to be honest with you, you want to focus in areas where it's a problem. And if you have a problem, focus there first, start there first. We've rarely had anybody cover 145 square miles because you can really focus the technology on where you need it to be.
Okay.
It's really, that probably be a little cost prohibitive. You're probably looking at about 35, 40 million bucks. Yes, sir.
How big an area did the 1.8 million cover?
Yeah.
I think that was 7 square miles. I'm sorry, DC. That's our third system. They've got another $2.5 million in the budget this year to kind of what they call finish it off. Because what happens is we put our system out there, and you find out about areas you didn't even know about. And so we covered 5th, 6th, and 7th district, and then we covered 1, 3rd, and 4th. If you go to convention there, you'll be happy to know the convention center is now covered by Shotspotter. So, but what they find is the holes. We start our system, and I'll show you in a second. We actually show you on the map the areas that we actually have covered from our technology. And we'll actually report gunfire outside, but our system's less accurate out here. So in other words, the accuracy of the technology is high within the coverage area, but our sensors still hear it outside. So we reported to them that they had a lot of gunfire up here in an area they didn't even know they had a problem with. And so now they want to fill in the blanks, the gaps, if you will, make sure it's properly covered. Yes, sir.
Is this system able to be moved? Say we cover one hotspot and then we clean it and then we want to move it to another hotspot area.
The answer is yes. But let me talk to you about that. We've never had a customer move our technology after they install it. And a lot of that has to do with, we've cleaned it up for now, but we want to make sure it stays cleaned up. And we don't want to lose the intelligence. And I got to tell you, it becomes very political. Can't tell you how many people we've heard screaming at each other, you're not moving it from my area and moving it over there. It's just not going to happen. So while practically, yes, it can be done, it may not be what you want to do, because you always want to know, the police need to have the intelligence. What's happening every day? And do I see a trend coming back up where people now they moving back over here and they starting to shoot again? Are we going to have a problem? So it's really better to leave it in. Once you spent the money to leave it in.
Criminals don't know, then they'll say, hey, they got the place covered, so let's get out of here.
Well, when the criminals start seeing that the police aren't responding anymore and the arrest rate's going down, they're pretty smart. They watch what's going on. They'll come back. And we've seen it come back. Yes, sir.
So you got displacement?
Yeah, a lot of displacements. There's, if you look at the psychology, obviously what we call the non-motivated shooters or the vicarious, the ones that just shoot celebratory-wise, those are pretty much knocked down because you arrest a couple people that did that and they go, okay, I'm not doing that around here. The real criminal starts to try to figure out how to fool the system. Like I said, we have them, sometimes they'll throw fireworks off and try to get you guys moving in this direction while they're going to go off and do something over here. They try to fool the system. When they find out they can't fool it, then they do move. They move somewhere else. And then typically that's when we end up putting up more square miles of this stuff because you figure it out. Yes, sir.
What about a trial period?
Well, when you talk about a trial, if you're talking about buying the system and trialing it, we're perfectly happy with that. It's very expensive to set this system up. I mean, we put somewhere between 18, 20 sensors per square mile. It's a science project still. I mean, we have to come out and put a lot of boots on the ground to figure out the best locations. We have to work with the community to find places to put the sensors themselves. Then we have to build a radio network for all that to communicate back in. So we did several trials early on with our Justice Department. There's a lot of good white papers that these guys can go out and read in terms of successes. I would say I equate it to this. Have you trialed it? You know, it's one of those situations where you know the refrigerator is going to work, and you know the refrigerator is going to keep your meat cold. Go ahead and buy the refrigerator. What else? Yes, sir.
Could I ask then, I mean, we appreciate the fact, and I appreciate the fact that we've been invited to this demonstration. What is it that the private businesses are going to be looking for, or are we expected to do something, or is it something we expect to put up for us, or are you expecting us to assist the police?
All I can do is speak of the experience that we have in other cities and countries. And so typically law enforcement and private business are in partnership already. I hope you are here in this country. Because if you're not, it's not a good thing. And part of that partnership, quite frankly, in a lot of the cities we're in, private businesses have actually paid for the system and not even challenged law enforcement. The city of Newark, New Jersey, who had a horrible homicide about 2.5 years ago, a couple of Mexican illegals assassinated 4 black children on their way home from school. It was probably the most heinous assassination that ever happened. They've been trying, Newark had been trying to buy our system for 2 years before that. That finally pushed everybody across the edge, and the mayor there, who was a young African-American mayor, went to Continental Airlines and to Prudential, the 2 largest employers in the area, and said, we can't wait. We can't try to raise the money for this anymore. they formed a foundation. They went to the local businesses and asked for donations, and they had a check to us in about 3 months after that. So those are the types of partnerships we're seeing. I'm not suggesting that businesses pay for it. I'm suggesting there's always a partnership between either locations putting the sensors up so that we have the right locations to put it up, and certainly the interoperability or the interaction between law enforcement and business always helps in terms of making sure that the gunfire is suppressed. What it's going to do for you as a business is obviously it's going to clean up the streets that you operate in. It's going to give the law enforcement a better chance of being proactive to make sure crime doesn't start before it gets out of control. I do know that we're working with the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and a number of other Caribbean countries. We're going to Trinidad in a couple of weeks. Any place where you're dependent on tourism dollars, knocking down crime is good for your business. And we're seeing that all the way across the countries that we're talking about. What else? Okay, let me run through this real quick and then we'll go take a bus. So I just very quickly want to show you the impact of what this software, and this is really where everything happens. All the other stuff that I talked about having to do is important. But having this information shortly after a gun is shot and having law enforcement know what to do is what it's all about. So this is a list of all the sensors that heard it. Our sensors go up high. They listen in an omnidirectional fashion. They have some intelligence in the sensor that basically is our first stage filtering. And then they talk back through a radio network to a server. So if a sensor hears something it thinks it needs a report, it sends that data in. And so the data here